It's been 3 weeks since Regulation G was announced, and the metagame has continued to develop. So today, we'll be taking a look at some of the best cores surrounding some of the restricted legendary Pokemon. So guys, to kick us off here today, we're going to be talking about Groudon. So Groudon right now is one of my absolute favorite Pokemon to play in the current metagame. I think this Pokemon is incredibly strong. It feels really, really nice to have a ground type. That is just, very, very powerful. Terra Fire is incredibly good on it. Obviously, it has Drought, which buffing up some of those fire type attacks like the T-Crashes is very, very nice. Precipice Blades, when it hits, is a fantastic move, but of course, sometimes it does miss. And of course, I think Clear Amulet has been really the big key factor for Groudon coming into this metagame. I think not being able to get intimidated by things like Incineroar is very, very nice, especially too when you can threaten a one-shot with Precipice Blades if they do not specifically EV for it, or, if they don't Defensive Terra, which is very, very nice. But the mons I think pair best with Groudon. Number one is Fluttermane. Now, Fluttermane, you can run it kind of a few different ways. I have seen people running things like Pixie Plate, even some Life Orb. I've even seen people running Booster Energy just in case you need to lead it without the Groudon. But I'm still a huge fan of the Choice Spec set. I think the Choice Specs Timid Max set is still incredibly good. Like this Pokemon, you give it Terra Fairy, right? Where's Fairy? Terra Fairy here. And you go for things like just Moonblast, Shadow Ball, Dazzling Gleam, of course. And then whatever you want in the last slot. Personally, I still really do like Icy Wind. Because there are some games where your Specs Fluttermane, its job isn't necessarily to carry the game as so much as it is to set up your teammates like the Groudon. Or, of course, our next friend here, the Ogerborn Hearthflame. Another incredibly good Pokemon here in the sun as well. But yeah, Fluttermane, it still pumps out ridiculous damage. Even if you run something like this, I think this is the set I was personally running. Something like this. And then that hits 103. Yeah, so that was the set I was running with Timid Nature. It still hits really hard just because you have the Choice Specs and the Terra Fairy. And of course, you can pair this up with things that have Helping Hand as well. Farigiraf is like a fantastic partner as well, which I won't touch on too much here. But obviously the draft, having the ability to set Trigger Room for Groudon, Helping Hands up your Pokemon as well is very, very good. Then we have Ogerborn Hearthflame here. Just one of the best mons in terms of a fire type in the sun. That's one of the beautiful things about Groudon, I think. You can pair it with other fire types and it doesn't feel as bad as in previous formats. Like when you're running things like Ninetales and Torkoal, both of them being fire types, it does feel kind of awkward, slapping on another 2 fire types with it, because all of a sudden you're rocking, 3 fire types, and it's like one of them's just Droughtmon, and it just kind of feels awkward. Where, yeah, the beauty of Groudon here is you can pair it up with things like Ogerpon plus a Chi-Yu, and it's just really, really good. Heatran's another mon I'll throw out there as well that I've been looking at to pair with Sun. But yeah, Ogerborn Hearthflame, it's just a Pokemon that, it hits pretty hard. It's a very fast one with a jolly nature. It's very good. And of course, Ivy Cudgel in the sun with Terra is just absurd. And it also pairs incredibly well with the next one here, which is our good friend Rillaboom. The big reason why I think Rillaboom and Ogerborn Hearthflame in particular are really good with Groudon teams is honestly because of its, pretty average matchup into Kyogre, right? When you think about Kyogre versus Groudon, Kyogre normally wins. It has the typing advantage, and of course, if it gets the rain up, then it is very, very hard for Groudon to play the game. Where Rillaboom is a fantastic switch in with items like Assault Vest, and of course, it can just fire off massive damage with Wood Hammers. And the terrain is also really, really nice. Plus, it has like Fake Out control, can pivot if it needs with U-turn. And of course, one of the beautiful things as well about Groudon is because you are running a ground type, you don't feel forced to run high horsepower, which I do think a lot of Rillabooms right now need if they aren't paired with Groudon. But yeah, like this core of 4 here, I do think is incredible. You have a lot of damage coming out of the Fluttermane and the Ogerpon. And of course, Rillaboom's a fantastic support. Groudon can also be used in a support-ive role, obviously helping it, enable the guys like the Fluttermane and the Ogerpon. But of course, as well, it can deal massive damage if you put it in the right situation, especially with things like Clear Amulet plus, like an Adamant Nature, like any 156. This mon absolutely slaps. It's also like a really good Sword Stance mon as well. Protect, of course, is really good. But some of the other partners, I won't go too in-depth on them here, but of course, any of the Proto-mons can be like really, really good. I'm a huge fan of obviously pairing it with something like Raging Bolt. I think it's another really good mon into the Kyogre matchups. Gouging Fire is definitely very interesting as well because it can howl. Brute Bonnet is another mon I've been speaking a bit about recently. I think it's actually really good on some of these Groudon teams because you get the attack boost on what is already a really good attack stat. And of course, it has things like Spore, Sucker Punch for the Calyrex-Shadows. You can fire off some big grass moves to the Kyogres. So yeah, it honestly is pretty decent. Even things like Sandy Shocks with Gravity can be good. Roaring Moon with Tailwind, solid. Screamtail with like Covet Cloak plus Speed Booster is also another really nice mon. And of course, Walking Wet giving you a water type that isn't hindered by sun is very good. And of course, just some other ones, the Chlorophyll mons. In particular, I'm talking about things like Lilligant, Venusaur, and Jumpluff. I think, honestly, Hisuian Lilligant's probably the best. Jumpluff is definitely interesting, but Venusaur's my favorite. But yeah, they're just some of the ones you can pair with Groudon. I think it is, without a doubt, one of the best ones in the format right now. Definitely probably top 3. So the next core I want to touch on here is built around Lunala. Now, Lunala to me is a very, very interesting Pokemon because Obviously, it shares the typing with Calyrex-Shadow, and Calyrex-Shadow is probably the best Pokemon in the format. But Lunala is a very, very interesting Pokemon because it plays a very different role, right? When you look at the stats, it's much bulkier than Calyrex-Shadow. It still hits very hard, but it is much slower as well. But one of the best things about Lunala, it's a restricted Pokemon that can utilize Trick Room. Now, while it is normally naturally a bit too fast to utilize the Trick Room, pairing it up with, Trick Room abusers on like balanced teams is very, very good. And because of that, the core we're going to talk about today is a team built around Lunala plus Ursaluna, the regular form. And the partners for this guy here, they're just P2, oh my god, Porygon 2, and of course Incineroar. Now this core here has a really, really cool niche together, really. Obviously Incineroar, great fake out control for both P2 and Lunala, getting up the Trick Room. Of course, getting parting shots into your Ursaluna as well can be very, very good. And of course, Intimidation is always fantastic as well. But the beautiful thing here with Lunala plus Ursaluna is Lunala is one of the better wide guard Pokemon in the format. Obviously, being a restricted Pokemon, it's pretty good. And yeah, just having a strong supporting move like that can be fantastic. And a lot of the time, clicking a move like wide guard when you're restricted can feel kind of bad because this is normally the centerpiece of your team. Its job really is to kind of carry the game. But when you have a Flame Orb Guts boosted Ursaluna with Facades and Earthquakes, you don't really mind clicking it too much. And of course, having that massive, attack from the Earthquake normally would hit your allies, but of course, Wide Guard does protect the Lunala from the Earthquake, but still enables you to hit the enemy team. And if you have a look at this here, man, like, look at this damage. You get burned on this thing, and this guy, it has over 300 attack, firing off massive stabs. It is like just a really, really good combo. Not to mention a normal and a normal type paired up with Lunala is very, very good. And of course, as well, we have Incineroar as well, being a dark type, which also pairs incredibly good with Lunala. Big reasons why is Lunala is a Pokemon 4x weak to ghost types. Of course, Saluna is immune to those. And of course, it is also 4x weak to dark types, which Incineroar resists both ghost and dark, which is obviously very, very solid. And of course, P2 is just P2. I think everyone kind of knows what it does at this point. With download, this one can actually do quite a bit of damage. Of course, against things like Ice Beam. People are even running Shadow Ball on it right now, which is very, very good. But yeah, it just clicks Trick Room. And yeah, it's like really solid. Trick Room recover. Also, like another tech as well I've spoken to some friends about is people going like Terra Blast here. And then they actually go Eerie Impulse. And the reason for that is because normal types, again, wall out Calyrex-Shadow, which like this team is really good into Calyrex-Shadow, by the way. Like obviously your Lunala matchup itself isn't fantastic, but your other three mons all just kind of beat Calyrex-Shadow, or at least like force it into, using things like, the side spam mode. But yeah, you just like Eerie Impulse it, and then all of a sudden they're -2, especially if you got Trick Room up, and then the game just feels fantastic. Obviously this mod as well is probably like the best Highlight user in the game. But yeah, this is just like a really, really sick team. As well too, I'll kind of talk on this here as well, just because of the set. I'm a huge fan of the Power Herb set. So you got like Trick Room, Wide Guard, and then you just got like Meteor Beam with Moon Guide's Beam. It's really, really strong, man. Like getting the +1 special attack on what is already like a really good special attack stat. Like you honestly don't even need to invest that much. You just go like 100 Modest or whatever. You go Quiet if you want to run like no speed. And yeah, it's just like really, really strong. You fire off these massive Meteor Beams, get to +1 special attack, and then all of a sudden you stab Moon Guy's Beam is just like ripping through teams. And the best part too is that just kind of allows you to go for the bolt. Like there is like some calc, I forget exactly how heavily invested it was. But there's like ways to live Wicked Blow on this one, which is kind of crazy. But it also just shows how good Shadow Shield is as an ability. Like if this Pokemon is at full HP, damage taken from attacks is halved, which is like super, super good. Especially too when you do pair it up with, some healing ones as well. Amoonguss is another like pretty common one on calls like this because one, pairs incredibly well with Incineroar, of course, but two, just polar puffing up your Lunala is very nice. And of course, even like, just side healing your Ursaluna can be very, very good in the late game. But yeah, this team, obviously, it loves to play with Trick Room. Anything that kind of enables the Trick Room, I think, is really, really good. Some redirection options, like Ogerpon is obviously incredibly good too. Of course, having something like your own Giraffe as well as a secondary Trick Room, which kind of enables Lunala to maybe go for something like Terra Fairy Moonblast as well, is very, very nice. Because I do think having options like Terra Fairy Moonblast is very good. Especially too because Terra Fairy is just so good on this Pokemon. But yeah, like this mod, honestly, it loves a lot of things. You kind of do want a bit of a fast mode as well. Some like either of the Urshifus can be pretty good. Specs Fluttermane obviously can be pretty good too. But yeah, it's still a really strong core. Definitely one of the better ways to play Trick Room in the current metagame. So the next legend I want to take a look at here is one of my all-time favorites, and that is Rayquaza. Now, Ray is a mod I've actually spoken quite a bit about on the channel since, this format has been announced. And I'm just a big believer in this Pokemon. I know a lot of people saying like, hey, just play D-Knight. D-Knight is just, like, it has inner focus, so you don't need Clear Amulet. You can't be faked out, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, but you can't click Swords Dance. You don't have, like, a really good attack stat. And then on top of that, you don't have the beautiful move called Dragon Ascent, right? having Dragon Ascent, to me at least, is the biggest reason why you run Ray over D-Knight. D-Knight can't have a good flying stab and like a Terra Normal Extreme Seed, which is what, again, I just personally really love about this mod. And not to mention, I think Ray just has some really good partners. Of course, Chen Pao is like a really good partner to have with it. I think Chen Pao's like favorite partner is still like Urshi Rapid, which is like incredibly good. And one thing this team can kind of struggle with is like other priority mons, and because of that, I think Farigiraf is like just another incredibly good mon to pair with it. Like, you have a look at this, right? You go like Focus Sash here, and Chen Pao just like, you know, with Sucker Punch, and even something like Lash Out, Crunch, whatever it is you want to go for, Throat Chop, can make this mon really good, of course, into Calyrex-Shadow Rider. Urshifu with its Choice Scarf, again, outspeeds things like Calyrex-Shadow Rider. With Terra Water and Surging Strikes next to the Chen Pao, you deal a lot of damage. Giraffe also, like, one of the underrated things about Giraffe is like, it's just a helping hand bot. It's really bulky, it gives you Armor Tail. And like, if your Ray ever gets +2, all of a sudden, you have this to worry about. Like, look at this, Terra Normal, E-Speed, this much damage, +2, you got 444 attack. And then Giraffe's just like sitting there clapping, you can't priority spam it. I just think this core is really good. I think it's like really underutilized. It's definitely something I personally want to adapt to more. Because there's obviously a lot of things you can really pair around this, right? Of course, you love big physical attackers with Chen Pao. The Ogre Pawns are really good as well. Yeah, even things like Incineroar I think can be really nice on this team as well to help the race set up. Rillaboom's good, of course. Like Ogre Hearthplane plus Rilla could also be like an incredibly good pairing for this team. Because then you get your Fire Water Grass next to a Chen Pao, next to your D90 Speed Spammer. Yeah, just really good, man. I'm a huge fan of Rayquaza, and I think this core of 4 here is like super good, especially too because like if you're looking to like play Ray, right, like slow and bulky, you have this Trick Room option where it's like, oh, your opponent like is trying to outspeed you with things like Flutter Mane and blah blah. And it's like, oh, now you just set up the Trick Room, like your max HP, and now you just start clicking Dragon Ascent under Trick Room. Like there's a lot this core can do, man. It's really nice. And again, even Chen Pao, like having like Ice Spinner into like you know, side spam obviously is really good. One of the major things this team really needs. And I also think too, you probably even run Ice Spinner on this over something like Aqua Jet. But yeah, just like having ways to like break terrain, but then also like if you go up against like an opposing Tailwind team, again, just drive clicking Trick Room for Chen Pao. Like, yeah, this thing's fast, don't get me wrong, but like if they get up Tailwind, this still gets outsped by a majority of the metagame. And because of that, yeah, I just think this core, it's got a lot of versatility. And you know, it isn't the easiest core to play by any means, but definitely like once the raid gets going, man, this mon is hard to stop. So the next core I want to look at here is a core, another one I've kind of spoken about a bit, and that is a core built around Terapagos here. And it is just, in my opinion, it's the Protector King core. Realistically, it is just probably the 2 best support bonds in the game right now, being Rillaboom and Incineroar. I think just Intimidate, Double Fake Out, Grassy Terrain is just incredibly good. And it also pairs incredibly well with Urshifu. The reason why I think this core is incredibly good is because, like, one, Terapagos is a mon that kind of needs time to set up. It wants to click its Calm Minds, right, to get up its, you know, Terra Starstorms and deal a lot of damage. And because of that, you have things like the Rillaboom and the Incineroar who can buy you the time with moves like Fake Out, you know, of course, Parting Shot and whatnot. Obviously, spamming out Intimidates as well. Rillaboom can also deal quite a bit of damage as well with Wood Hammers and whatnot. Just, you know, it's just annoying, yeah? But sometimes it is very hard for the Terapagos to set up, right? You can't just lead this mon every game and run through. Screens is another, Grimmsnarl itself, I should say, is another Pokemon that's really picking up a lot right now. And that's probably like another topic I'll kind of touch on as well in the coming days, is these Pokemon that are kind of coming out that weren't necessarily great in Reg F that are probably going to be pretty good in Reg G. And Grimmsnarl is one of those. And because of that, I think having something like the Urshifu on your team is really good, right? Like Mystic Water Surging Strikes with like Terra Steel and whatnot gives you really good defensive utility. And it just allows you to deal massive damage with the Surging Strikes, with the close combats, of course. And I really do think it's able to break holes for the Terapagos, or at least chip things down enough to a point where eventually when the Urshi goes down, you should be able to get the Terapagos in a pretty good board state, get up, you know, 1 or 2 Calm Minds, and then kind of just run through from there. And again, like, Rilla Incin is just such a broken combo right now. Like, between, like, you know, whatever you want, like, safety goggles, I'm a huge fan of even, like, Assault Vest Incin. Probably not with the Rillaboom, because I do think Rillaboom wants the Assault Vest. But yeah, something like these two here, you go, like, Covet Cloak on the Terapagos here, and then you kind of just, like, buy time, break holes with the Urshi, and yeah, it just gives you, like, again, a really strong Fire Water Grass core. These 3 Pokemon in particular, Rilla Incin and Urshi Rapid, all cover each other incredibly well. Just a really good core. And Terapagos right now is one of the better restricteds, right? This Pokemon, when it gets going, it is incredibly hard to stop. We've seen it time and time again, you know, top cut a lot of the bigger events online. It's won plenty of big events as well. I think this Pokemon is just incredible. The next restricted that we're going to be taking a look at here is our good friend Koraidon. Now, while Koraidon and Groudon do play pretty similar in terms of what they want to pair with, obviously Pokemon that have used the Sun, I do think Koraidon in particular is definitely the more offensive too. of the two, sorry. It is the Pokemon where you want to pair it with things that allow, enable it to go really, really quick and really put a lot of pressure on the map. Oh, sorry, the map on the board. We're playing too much Toto 2, sorry. And because of that, of course, Fluttermane, Raging Bolt, I do think are two of the better ones. Raging Bolt really helps out with the Kyogre matchup, kind of what we were talking about earlier with the Rillaboom. But of course, I do think Raging Bolt is just a naturally better Pokemon in the sun, right? Especially too when you pair it up with Koraidon, being that you've got the electric type now, paired up with this, having Double Dragon as well, obviously is pretty solid. And then of course, Fluttermane, this is just a choice specs one, right? We spoke about it before. This one, it clicks choice specs, it clicks big moves, right? Raging Bolt on these teams, honestly, is a pretty good Assault Vest mon. I have also seen people pair up like Rillaboom with Raging Bolt on these teams with like the lefties Cub Mine stuff. But I do think the final piece of this team here is Tornadus. Now, we didn't really touch on it too much with the Groudon team because I don't think the Groudon necessarily needs the secondary, the speed control or the secondary weather control as much. But I do think Koraidon is a mon that really needs its sun up, right? Groudon doesn't necessarily need the sun quite like Koraidon does because, of course, it gets the attack boost from its ability here. But yeah, because of that, I think having Sunny Day plus Tailwind is incredibly good on these teams, right? Like, on these teams, you really just want to go first, right? You really, really want to go first. You want to go first, you want to hit hard, and you kind of really just want to break a hole through the opposing team before they can really do anything to you, right? And because of that, some of the other partners I think that are really good with this is, of course, Giraffe, the Farigiraf, giving you an ability to either one, just Trick Room and Prison, I think is really good, but two, also just like reversing Trick Room is obviously really nice. It's another Pokemon as well that's pretty good into our good friend Calyrex-Shadow as well, which is important. Another big one as well that we don't really have here are fire types. Of course, Ogerpon and Earthflame is really good, but I'm also a massive fan of Choice Scarf Chi-Yu on these teams with Terra Fire. I think Terra Fire Chi-Yu with Scarf on a Koraidon team is incredibly good. It's something I've personally been testing a lot as of lately. But I think it's incredibly good. And of course, having like Raging Bolt and Fluttermane next to a Chi-Yu is never a bad thing, right? Having like a special attack boosted Thunderclap with Beads of Ruin. Same with Fluttermane, like Terra Fairy, Moonblast, Dazzling Gleam, next to a Chi-Yu is just, it's a lot of damage, man. You really can't, say anything bad about it. But yeah, I think Koraidon, honestly, this is one where early format, everyone was sleeping on it. I'm telling you guys right now, Koraidon, in my opinion, top 5 restricted, could be top 3. There are some restrictors I think that are definitely falling off. Miraidon is one of them. I don't think Miraidon is a mon that is necessarily cut out for the current single restricted format. And even Calyrex-Ice, while I think it is still incredibly good, it may even fall out of the top 3 for me, and Koraidon honestly could take that slot. I think it's incredibly good. I think Sun right now just feels absolutely broken. I definitely think Sun's the best weather in the game right now. And really, if Calyrex-Shadow wasn't a thing, I do think Sun would definitely be the best archetype. Now, because we were just talking about how broken Sun is, I think it is only right to talk about probably the best answer to Sun, and that is Rain in the form of Kyogre, right? So Kyogre is a Pokemon that, coming into this metagame, a lot of people were hating on, right? And personally, I'm a massive fan of Kyogre. I love this one. It's my second favorite restricted legendary. And I had high hopes, right? I had high hopes. Now, at the start, everyone were running things like Choice Scarf or Choice Specs. Now, I don't think they're necessarily the best. I saw Sableye VGC was, talking about it as well. I think Mystic Water Bulky is definitely the way to play this Pokemon. Honestly, you can just run something like 76 Modest, and with its two main stabs being Water Spout, and of course, Water Spout, and what's the other one? Origin Pulse. God, this mod pumps out a lot of damage, right? Like with the rain you set up from the Drizzle, you've got the Mystic Water as well. As long as you go first, these moves just pump out damage, right? It's incredibly good. I do think a defensive Terra is nice. I'm personally a big fan of defensive Grass, just because Amoonguss can be like super annoying, and then you just go Grass plus like Ice Beam, and you have ways to deal damage to it now. But yeah, Kyogre, honestly, I think it's really good. And as I said, I think Sun is incredibly good right now. And because of that, I do think Kyogre will definitely continue to rise up in usage. We did actually get to see, it had some really good results over the past weekend. But basically, anyway, what Pokemon do you want to pair with it? To me, Kyogre's base line of like partners it wants to play with are pretty simple. Tornadus is like the most obvious one, right? Again, talking about what we said before about secondary, weather control. Rain Dance obviously is really good. Of course, Tailwind with Kyogre allowing it to go first is really, really good. Then we have options like Liquid Storm as well, which obviously doesn't miss in the rain. Of course, Hurricane gives you an even stronger single target move in the rain, which is really nice. 30% chance to confuse as well is very good. And the list goes on and on, right? It also has access to things like Taunt and whatnot, which is really good. Of course, our good friend Urshi Rapid. This is a mon I feel like I've been talking about a lot today. I think Choice Scarf Urshi Rapid in the current metagame is really good. There are not many Pokemon that really want to deal with a Choice Scarf Urshi Rapid. This mon just feels so good. And if you get it in the rain, right, you don't even need Terra Water. You can run a defensive Terra, run Terra Steel or something like that. And then you just go like Surging Strikes, and all of a sudden there is like nothing that can eat a Surging Strikes from this Pokemon. Especially, yeah, like in rain, it feels like really, really good. And then, of course, our last guy here that I'm going to touch on for the most part is Amoonguss. Amoonguss here, it's got Regenerator, right? It's got Pollen Puff. It's got Rage Powder. It's got Spore. You guys know what this does. This little mushroom, he's one of the better Pokemon in the game for a reason, right? He's just very annoying to deal with, right? Very, very annoying. It's really good at side Pollen Puffing the Kyogre. It's really good for redirecting things into the Kyogre and the Urshifu. It's just incredible, right? Some of the other mons I do think compare really well with this as well as, of course, Archaludon. Having a Steel type on these teams is definitely really nice, especially too with, Electro Shot. Of course, we have a Water and a Grass Pokemon here, so Incineroar is never a bad option. Even Paragraph is like really, really nice for the ability to just like stop Kyogre from eating priority moves, which can be one of the best ways to deal with Water Spout, which I definitely do think is definitely something to keep an eye on. But yeah, I think Kyogre right now is in a really good spot. I think this mon is, while it's probably not a top 3 mon, maybe not even a top 5, it is definitely probably hovering in that top 7 right now. And because of that, I think this mon still has a lot of potential. And if you play it right, it can be very good. But speaking of rain teams, there is actually, surprisingly enough, another rain team right now that is going around that is doing pretty good. And that is a core built around Zacian, pairing it up with Pelipper. Now, this core is very, very similar to the one we were just kind of touching on. I know, very, very boring. It is literally just Urshi and it's a Amoonguss. I know, I apologize. But it's good. It's good. Like, you can't... Like, I'm sorry. I hate when I put the same cores there all the time. I hate when every team I have has got Urshi, Amoonguss, and Incineroar, Rillaboom. But they're too good to not have here, right? Like, yeah, sure, we could probably, like, talk about some other mons. And I have for the most part, right? Even teams like this, right? We can talk about guys like Qianpao, right? Rillaboom and all that on this team. But at the end of the day, I think this is the core of 4 that really makes these teams function. Of course, Zacian, this is one of the fastest Pokemon in the metagame, one of the strongest Pokemon in the metagame. As a matter of fact, it is probably the second fastest, maybe third if a Lucky kind of picks up in usage. But you look at the attack stat, they just nerfed this thing by 20 base points. It doesn't matter. This guy still hits like an absolute truck. Rusted Sword, of course, is still incredibly good. It gets some really, really good stab moves in. Obviously, Behemoth Blade, of course. Play Rough is obviously good as well. And then, of course, that gets access to Sword Stance. Also has access to things like Sacred Sword and Close Combat as well if you want some coverage. It's just really, really good, man. I think I did a video actually on this Pokemon the other day. If anyone is interested, like this is the team I was running or the set on it. I think when we go down to like 209, yeah. So this was the set I ran on mine. I think it's really good. I think it's just strong. I think this one's just really, really good, right? You pair it up with Pelipper. Obviously, Pelipper gives you the rain with Drizzle. That's Rain Dish. Gives you the rain. Why is the rain important? Because this is a Steel type and you don't want to eat Fire types. And there are a lot of really good Fire types in the metagame right now. So having the option, of course, to get up the rain is very, very nice. It is also a relatively fast-ish Tailwind mon. Like, it really isn't, but with Focus Sash, Timid, Max, you're not that slow, I guess. Also has access to Wide Gun being one of the biggest things, I think, for Pelipper right now. Like, Wide Gun in the current metagame against a lot of these top Pokemon is incredibly good, and Pelipper is one of the better users of the move, which I do think is very, very important. But it also just has 2 really strong stabs in Hurricane and Weather Ball. And honestly, one of the beautiful things about Weather Ball is even if you go up against like a Groudon team and they change the weather on you, like a Weather Ball coming off this mon is actually still doing quite a lot of damage. And that's why we've also seen people go for things like the Stellar Terra on this Pokemon, right? Because like say Groudon switches in, changes it to Sun, all of a sudden a Terra Stellar Weather Ball, getting the fire boost is doing quite a lot of damage, which is definitely really, really nice, right? But then of course Urshi, we kind of spoke about it before. You go Scarf, you go Mystic Water, either or. You click Surging Strikes in the rain. Rain also enables you to go for a defensive Terror as well with something like Terra Steel. If you're crazy like me, though, you just go like Terra Water and run through. And of course, Gust, very similar to before. It's a grass type in the rain. It loves getting the, the reduction from the fire type attacks. It spores, it sleeps, it heals, it redirects. Like, yeah, man, it's just good, man. And Zacian is a mon where everyone was sleeping on it. Don't sleep on Zacian. She's the queen, man. Like, Zacian is such a good Pokemon that I am shocked how much hate it's gotten. Like, I really think we need actual official events before people stop hating on this one. Because everyone's been saying, oh, it fell off, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, look, it's probably not Calyrex-Shadow. But I definitely see a world, especially once double restricted drops, where Zacian is like one of the best Pokemon in the game. Like top 3, like it could be on like every team just as a second legendary. It's that good. So moving on from one dog, we have the other, and that is Zamazenta. Now, Zamazenta is a very, very interesting Pokemon to me. Because obviously, being someone who didn't play competitive in Sword and Shield, but heard, rumors or, heard what people said, Zacian was the most broken Pokemon in the game. Zamazenta was just average, right? It wasn't a very good Pokemon. But, after the nerfs to these Pokemon, getting Rusted Sword giving you, Rusted Shield giving you +1 to your physical defense stat. This Pokemon have a really good physical defense stat. But now also having access to Iron Defense, Body Press. Zamazenta is unironically a good Pokemon, right? It also gets access to Heavy Slam, which I believe is the steel move of choice, because the ones you would want to hit with it is like, they take more from Heavy Slam than Shield Bash or whatever it is. Behemoth Bash, I think. But then it also gets access to Wide Guard, which is the other major thing for these teams. I'm a huge fan of Wide Guard just in general. I think it's just an incredibly broken move. Especially too, because like one of the beautiful things about Zamazenta is this is a Pokemon where there are some games it's its job to carry the game, right? You go up against something like, for example, Terapagos. It's a steel type. This mon, it gets up 1 iron defense and then just body presses through those, teams, right? It does a lot of damage, right? There are other games where, say, you're up against a Calyrex-Shadow where Zamazenta can't win you the game. Zamazenta is not going to just kill the Calyrex-Shadow for you, right? But that's where the partners come in, right? And Zamazenta's job is to kind of support the team. Anyway, what are the partners we pair with this guy? One, I'm a big fan of Rillaboom. I think having Fake Out plus the Grassy Train is just, again, really, really good. Not to mention, Rillaboom's just like a really good guy right now. But the other one here is funny because it's kind of a throwback to one of the Komodo teams that was running around for a hot minute. And that's the Ting Lu stuff, right? Because again, we talk about this Pokemon here, right? We have Iron Defense, right? We have Dauntless Shield. Like, Zamazenta's defense stat is not the issue, right? Like, again, its special defense stat is like really, really high. So that's also kind of not the issue. But of course, like, you got to be buffing up the defense stat anyway. Even uninvested, this thing's like 240, right? Because of that, having Ting Lu there, putting out Vessel of Ruin is incredibly good. Not to mention, it also really helps out a lot with our good friend Calyrex-Shadow. And it's also just pretty good into any of the special attacking restrictors, right? Some of the guys out there like Lunala, it's really good into. Of course, our good friend Koraidon, it's pretty solid into, right? Even has like a decent-ish matchup into something like the Zacian, right? Well, it's not like amazing. Having the option to like eat any one hit and then just fire off, a stab ground move, I do think is very, very nice. And of course, it's just a really, really bulky mon that has a lot of different options depending on what the team needs. But the final partner I want to touch on for this guy here is either of the Urshifus. Now, they are both really, really good. Urshi Rapid, of course, we've spoken about it a lot today. Everyone kind of knows what it does. And because of that, I'm going to put Urshi Dark here. But again, this Pokemon really doesn't want to deal with Ghost types. Zamazenta hates Ghost types. It gets hard walled out by, of course, our good friend Golden Joe, right? It does not like playing into Calyrex-Shadow Rider. It doesn't mind Fluttermane, but that's only because Fluttermane is a fairy type, and that's why we have the Heavy Slam. But Urshi Dark is a mon that does, it really does enable a lot of those really bad matchups for you. Not to mention having Urshi Dark next to Ting Lu is obviously not too bad as well. And of course with Fake Out support, it's pretty good. And it's also just a really good mon where if Zamazenta needs to take a backseat and be the support, you can rely on the Urshi Dark to win you the game in those kind of games. But of course too, some of the other mons that you probably want to pair with Zamazenta is probably some form of healing. Of course Amoonguss is really good. Even Comfey is probably pretty decent with it as well. So there is only 2 restricteds left on for today's list. And of course, everyone knows who they are. It's the Callies. It's probably the 2 best Pokemon in the format right now. At least 2 of the best. As I said, I'm not the biggest believer in Calyrex-Ice being a top 2 Pokemon right now. So I do think Trick Room is a little harder to pull off. But Calyrex-Ice, this is, without a doubt, one of the best Pokemon in the metagame right now. Incredibly, incredibly good Pokemon. Of course, it is the slowest restricted in the game. It is very fast. And of course, as one is an absolutely broken ability. And of course, it is super bulky. It's not an easy Pokemon to take down. Not to mention, its stab move being Glacial Lance is incredibly good. But yeah, having Glacial Lance and Trick Room makes this mod an absolute menace, especially since it got Clear Amulet in this generation. Making Calyrex-Ice definitely one of the hardest mons to deal with if you were not prepared for it. But of course, Calyrex and wants to get up Trick Room. How do you get up Trick Room on these teams? Farigiraf honestly feels like the best Trick Room setter right now that is in a restricted legendary. This mon is really, really good. Armortail pairing it up with things like our good friend Incineroar, of course, getting up the Trick Room freely is very, very nice. But everyone also knows that Farigiraf's best mate from the past format is Blood Moon Ursaluna, which also pairs up incredibly well with Calyrex, right? Obviously, Calyrex is an incredibly strong physical attacker, and because of that, having the Blood Moon Ursaluna being a very good special attacker does help it out quite a bit. Not to mention being that it is a normal type paired up next to a Calyrex-Ice, it does help out a lot with the matchup into Calyrex-Shadow Rider. And the last mod for this core that I'm going to touch on, of course, is Ogerpon. But this time, it is actually Ogerpon. Oh, apparently we can't spell. It's Ogerpon Stone form. And I'll kind of get into that why that is in a second. But of course, on these teams, guys, I think having ways to get up a second Trick Room is really good. And of course, Fake Out support obviously is really nice as well. And honestly, Incineroar probably just comes here. He's an honorary mention of this team. I think Incineroar is like almost always needed. But Ogerpon, the reason why I love it so much right now on some of these Trick Room teams is sturdy. Just having that built-in focus sash basically means that you can always just keep your giraffe alive. And yeah, that's kind of like what it's there for, right? It just redirects and just keeps redirecting until it dies. Allowing one of, either the Calyrex or the Blood Moon to come in and kind of sweep through from there. But another really cool thing I think Ogerpon has right now is it is actually a relatively fast taunt Pokemon. And the reason why that is really cool for me, at least, is because, like, currently, a lot of people's ways to beat some of these Trick Room teams is just to go in prison, whether that be their Indeedee, whether that be their Farigiraf, right? A lot of these guys are just, like, they're just taking, like, Trick Room in prison just to hard wall these teams, and because of that, they just, like, it's, like, the easiest way to beat it. And because of that, fast taunt is really nice. Obviously, Ivy Cudgel is, like, really strong. You kind of sometimes do have to run Power Whip on this one if you do want to run a Grass-type stab, but I don't necessarily think that's the worst thing anyway, because, again, I don't even think, like, Ogerpon Stone Form needs to run Spiky Shield, because its job a lot of the time is spam Follow Me till it dies, and on the odd occasion where it's not clicking Follow Me, it's probably just hitting with, like, some of its big attacks. And because of that, I think a set like this, where you just want to, like, Max Jolly, with no Protect, is probably one of the better ways to play it, right? You can taunt most of the things you need to taunt, because you can't get priority taunted because of Farigiraf, and of course, you can just sit there and fire off some big attacks and deal quite a lot of damage. But yeah, this definitely is one of the better ways to play Calyrex right now. Having two really big attackers, whether being the Blood Moon and the Calyrex in Trick Room, is incredibly good. And of course, draft Ogerpon Instant, it makes getting up Trick Room a breeze for these guys. And honestly, if you can ever get them in the right situation, they're all just kind of going to sweep through, and it's honestly not going to be a pleasant time for your opponent. To round out this video, we have the last mon on my list, and that of course is Calyrex-Shadow. Now, look, I'm not going to go too in-depth on this, simply because Calyrex-Shadow actually, surprisingly enough, has a lot of really good Pokemon that you can play around it. Honestly, this Pokemon is so good that you probably don't even have to build the team around it. You can just build a core of 5 you think is good, slap Caly-Shadow on, and you're going to be good to go. But for me, personally, when I'm playing with my Cali as my centerpiece of the team, there are two Pokemon in particular I do not like leaving home without, and that is Mienshao, and that is Indeedee. Why are these ones so good? Well, Indeedee, it gives you Psychic Terrain, which is really good for clicking Expanding Force. It is also just a Follow Me Pokemon that also has Trick Room in Prison, that beautiful fun strategy we just spoke about, where you've got the fastest Pokemon in the game, right, with Calyrex-Shadow, or at least, the second fastest, probably the only one that's actually going to see any competitive play. But yeah, you've got this mon where it's super fast, it hits super hard. What does it need? It just needs to stop the Trick Room from going up, man. It needs to just spam Follow Me till it dies, stop the Trick Room from going up, and hell, if you want, just start clicking Helping Hands. Yeah, just click Helping Hands. Make sure the Calyrex-Shadow is doing as much damage as possible and really enable it to sweep through the game. But then we also have Mienshao, which again is, like, in my opinion, the perfect partner for Calyrex, right? What does Calyrex not want to go up against? Doesn't want to go up against Dark types. He doesn't want to go up against normal types. Why? Because you can't hit either of them really with the what's it called? The Ghost type move. Obviously, normal is immune to it. Dark resist it. And of course, Expanding Force, the Dark types are immune to, right? So because of that, we have a nice fat stab at close combat, which is incredibly good because Astral Barrage plus close combat will kill any Incineroar. And of course, with Inner Focus here, you can't be faked out, you can't be intimidated, which is beautiful. But it doesn't end there. Mienshao is also a fake out Pokemon, really good. It's also a wide guard Pokemon, really good for the mirrors. And of course, it is a feint Pokemon as well, which is really good because Calyrex really does not want wide guard clicked against it. And because of that, your opponent can go for the wide guard, you go for the feint and break it, and it's just a wrap. Not to mention, a lot of the time, people will kind of just sit behind Protects, to kind of stall out the Calyrex and position their board better. Feint in that situation is, of course, really, really strong. But there is one other Pokemon I do want to add to this list, and that is a Pokemon I've actually been playing around with a lot myself as of lately, and that is Whimsicott. The reason for Whimsicott being on these Cali teams is, well, for quite a few reasons. One, it has access to Tailwind, which can be very important because sometimes one of the better ways to beat something like Cali is to just outspeed the Cali and kill it before it can move. Because of that, being able to match Tailwind to make sure your Cali is fast is very, very important in my opinion. But two, we're in a metagame where Encore honestly feels super broken. Whimsicott is also a Pokemon that naturally can just click Helping Hands, and of course it has something like a Stab at Moonblast, which again I do think is pretty solid in the current metagame. But realistically, Whimsicott just has an incredibly deep support move pool, right? If you have a look at the status moves this Pokemon learns, it honestly is kind of nutty, right? We'll go down here. Fake Tears, of course, with Calyrex is incredibly good. Light Screen can definitely be really nice from time to time. It gets Switcheroo, it gets Priority Taunt, which is very, very nice. It gets Charm, which is a really good way to slow down things like Zacian. Of course, Cotton Spore being one of the best speed control options in the game right now is very, very nice. I've even seen people play stuff like Misty Terrain as well on these Whimsicott teams. For anyone who kind of doesn't understand how that works, if you go up against, you know, an opposing Trick Room team, like say an Indeedee plus Hatterene, you can go Misty Terrain to remove the Psychic Terrain and then just lock them into Trick Room with Encore, which is definitely one of the funnier ways to play it. But yeah, Whimsicott, it's got a, look at this, man. It also gets, you know, Sunny Day. It's got double terrain. You can go Worry Seed as well if you're really worried about your Amoonguss matchup. Honestly, Whimsicott's bag is just so deep, man. There's a lot it can do. But yeah, man, Cali, like, again, I could tell you guys like 20 Pokemon that work really good with Cali. Obviously, both Urshifu forms are really, really good. I think Cali also loves having a Dark type on its team as well. So Urshi Dark obviously fits that role. Incineroar, of course, is really good. My guy Chi-Yu with Choice Scarf is really good. Like, Chi-Yu next to Cali, dude, giving like a Beads of Ruin on a Cali board, like, oh my god, stop it, man. It does a stupid amount of damage, dude. But yeah, Cali, obviously, I think it's the best Pokemon in the game. I think it's the best Pokemon ever created. Maybe it's not number one if like we get Mega Ray back. I don't know. Maybe it's even number one in a Mega Ray format. I honestly couldn't tell you guys. But yeah, I think this is definitely Cali's the best one of the better cores to play around it. But yeah, guys, that's basically it for this video. I guess let me know what you think down below of all these cores that we went over today. And of course, let me know if you think I missed anything. Obviously, there are restrictors not on this list. Koraidon is a mon I wanted to put on this list, but I couldn't really bring myself to it. And I don't know if I mentioned the poll or the community poll earlier in the video. Because I currently, right now, there will be a poll live for the team I will be building a team around for. I'm doing a team building guide is what I should be trying to say for the start of Regulation G. I'm planning to drop it probably in the next 2 weeks. And I have a poll on right now, and I'll be, you know, deciding which Pokemon I'm building around probably in the next 2 days. And Koraidon is in the final 4. I picked the 16 mons I wanted to play around. I was like, hey, here's, you know, 4 different polls with 4 different Pokemon, blah, blah, blah. Now we're at the final 4. Just go vote. You'll see what I mean if you go to the community tab. Go there, check it out. If you look, honestly, if you made it to the end of the video and you're checking out the community tab, like the video, click subscribe. It means the world to me, obviously. Honestly, it really, really does. But yeah, I was going to say, Koraidon is a mon that I'm not the biggest believer in right now, but it's in the final 4, and maybe I'm going to have to force myself to be a believer. But yeah, anyway, guys, that's going to be it for this one. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.